to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
This episode is brought to you by Latin Excellence. Visit latinexcellence.com. That's Latinx, CELLENCE.com or latinxmovement.com to learn more and shop our merchandise. You are excellence. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. This is Hispanic Heritage Month Edition. My name is Luis Rosa, and I am your host. Hispanic Heritage Month takes place from September 15th to October 15th every year as time to recognize and celebrate the many contributions, culture, and extensive histories of the American Latino community. It first began as a Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968 and later on became Hispanic Heritage Month in 1988. Since then, the month has been celebrated nationwide through festivals, art shows, conferences, community gatherings, and much more. The reason it starts on September 15th is because it celebrates the independence days of several Latin American countries, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua on September 15th, Mexico on September 16th, and Chile on September 18th. It also includes holidays that recognize Hispanic contributions, such as Virgin Islands Puerto Rico Friendship Day, which is celebrated in the U.S. Virgin Islands the second Monday in October. For this month, I'd like to highlight individuals who have made a great contribution in their chosen profession and the community at large. So now I'd like to introduce you to today's guest, very special guest, my brother from another, Diego Verdugo. Diego is first-generation immigrant from the Mexican state of Sonora. His family arrived to Arizona in 2001 with the hope of pursuing the American dream. He is a cancer survivor and has battled a chronic immunodeficiency since birth. In 2012, Diego became the first in his family to graduate from college by earning an undergraduate degree in economics and business and Spanish language from Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa. Diego entered the financial services industry by joining Principal in 2012. In his current role, he provides consultative support to advisors on advanced financial planning concepts and strategies. Diego became a certified financial planner professional in August 2021 and is currently pursuing a Master of Science degree in personal financial planning. Diego serves on multiple nonprofit organization boards, including the Junior Achievement of Arizona Phoenix, Metro Board, and the Association of Latino Professionals for America, also known as ALPHA. He's an advocate for financial literacy and devotes much of his time to helping close the financial knowledge and wealth gaps of underrepresented and low-income communities. He is a champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and has been recognized as an ambassador for his work in this space. In 2020, Diego was recognized by Investment News as a member of its prestigious 40 Under 40 program in recognition of his accomplishments, contributions to the industry, leadership, and promise. Diego currently lives in Phoenix with his fiancée, who's pregnant with their second child, congratulations, and his 4-year-old daughter. His family has recently ventured in the entrepreneurship space with the launch of several small businesses, which we'll learn about today. And without further ado, welcome, Diego.
Awesome, hermano. Thank you very, very much. As we've discussed prior to this, this is quite the honor for me to partake on your podcast. And it's funny, as I was thinking about just the opportunity, I told my lady that I knew I was going to make it when, if I ever made it onto your podcast. So thank you for the opportunity. We now go back a few years, and it's been a pleasure making not only a connection with you, but developing a relationship. So thank you for having me.
Oh, the honor is all mine, my brother. I'm so glad that we linked up, man. And I'm so excited to see your progression. And I know that this is just the beginning. I always like to say that about you because I know you're just getting started, man. The impact that you will have in this profession is going to be felt for a long time. And I'm just happy to be along for the ride, brother. So thank you for taking the time to be here. It's an impressive resume, man. I don't even know how you find the time because you are definitely juggling, career, family, and businesses, right, in general, which is it's great, man. So I wanted for you to share a little bit with us. Tell us about your background and how you ended up in Phoenix and everything.
Absolutely. Again, thanks for the opportunity. And just really quickly to speak to your comment on having the time. Just like you, brother, I don't think that any of us have the time, right? I think we make the time to to do the things that we need to do. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So let's talk about my background then. So I was actually, as you mentioned, born and raised in Mexico, the state of Sonora, which is right south of Arizona here. My parents' house is about 3.5 hours southeast of Phoenix. And so we actually get to visit there quite often. So my family came over in 2001. We were very fortunate to be sponsored by some family to come over to the U.S. Didn't know any English at the time. I was probably, I think, 11, 12 years old. And, I was just thrown into the fire. And it was certainly a big shock, as you can imagine, right? Not just from a cultural perspective, but from a language standpoint as well. But the reality is my family left looking for better opportunities, and this was something that we couldn't let pass. And so we took the leap of faith and came over to the U.S. And it's been a great ride so far. Pretty wild ups and downs, as you can imagine, but certainly very rewarding. And so shortly after coming over to the U.S., my brothers and I'm actually the youngest of 4 guys. And then we have a younger sister as well. We then started school in the U.S. Here in Arizona. There's a small town called Douglas, Arizona, again, in the Southeast region. And so we started school, all of my siblings and myself. And I was actually, always about education. Even back in Mexico, I had good grades. I was always a good student. And so for me, again, it was just a big deal to come over to the U.S. and be able to study here and actually attend a U.S. school. However, when I started school, it was actually very intimidating for me because, ironically, I was a very good student back in Mexico. So when I actually started school here in the U.S., brother, it was very taxing for me because I didn't speak the language, right? And so I went from basically being at the top of my class all throughout elementary school and to all of a sudden not knowing even what the teacher was saying. And so, again, I started just feeling, down, probably borderline depressed at the time, anxiety, you name it. And so my mother at the time actually spoke to a psychologist, and the psychologist actually recommended that I went back to Mexico and actually take 1 year of private English classes as I was finishing elementary school back in Mexico. And actually, ironically, in Mexico, elementary school goes from the first grade through 6th grade, unlike here in the U.S. And so it actually gave me an opportunity to graduate with the rest of my friends and peers. And as I was finishing my 6th year of elementary school back there, I was actually taking English classes. And so fast forward to the end of the year, I was able to again graduate with my friends that I had been with, all along elementary school. And I actually was taking private English classes after school. And so by the time I came back to the U.S. the next year into the 7th grade, I had at least a basic foundation of the knowledge, of the language. And so at that point, it was definitely much easier for me to sort of hit the ground running, right? And be able to connect with my peers here in the U.S. and obviously my teachers. And from that moment on, brother, it was, just a great experience because I was able to, first of all, meet a lot of people, obviously start to learn the language and understand the culture here in the U.S. Although where we used to live in that small town in Douglas, the population there is mainly Hispanic. People, you go to the grocery store and, the ladies there are Mexican American, they speak Spanish to you. So it wasn't too different, right, from that cultural standpoint. It wasn't a tremendous shock. It was a change, but it wasn't a big change per se. Now, fast forward, and of course, I finished elementary school in Mexico, and then went on to finish middle school here in the U.S., and then I went on to high school. Now, in high school, same thing. I had a great experience there. By that point, I was actually, I had a pretty good grasp on the language. And I became an honors student in high school. And so that opened up many doors and opportunities for me as I was about to graduate high school. And I ended up getting offers from several schools, several colleges and universities here in the U.S. And it came down to two schools. It was between Northern Arizona University, which is up in northern Arizona here, and Cornell College. And it's funny because people ask me the question, well, how did you end up in Iowa, right, out of all places? And I always say, well, one, they were very good at recruiting. I don't know how they found me, but I started getting mail from them and calls and what have you. And then number two, they gave me almost a full ride scholarship, brother. And so, that was probably the moment where I realized that, hey, you know what? Maybe this American dream is in fact achievable, right? And at least I can start working on it via at least education at the time. And so now, granted, that being said, I didn't know anything about the college experience. I didn't know anything about financial aid or what to even do, right? And so I started to research. I started to meet people, rely on my counselors and the school officials to help me sort of through the application process. And it's interesting because the first time that I actually formally applied to Cornell, I got rejected because my SAT scores were very low. Now, I think that's, it's important for us to talk about that really quickly, right? Because as you know, as a minority, as a first generation immigrant, again, I was just not familiar with the college application process. And so with that ignorance behind me, I didn't know that, I could take maybe a course to pass the SAT, right, to help me have higher scores and things like that. So I ended up having to retake my SATs. And the second time I did, I was able to improve my scores and then reapply to Cornell. And that's when I was accepted. And that's when they offered me the scholarship. And so at that point, it was a world of change, right? I mean, at that point, I sort of made the conclusion of, well, it's either this or I stay behind and probably, not have as good of an opportunity as I otherwise would if I actually went out of state. Now, Cornell College, brother, is actually a private liberal arts college. So in general, the quality of the education was going to be much better compared to if I, had stayed in-state at a public school. Nothing against public colleges and universities, but certainly when you attend a private school, if you can afford it one way or another, that's an investment that a lot of people would want to make, right? And so it was a leap of faith. Once again, I packed my bags. I had a one-way ticket. I couldn't even afford to visit the college, brother, let alone take my family with me or what have you. So I ended up showing up there, and it's funny because I tell the story all the time. I ended up showing out there again, not knowing or not having a clue, how this process was even going to begin. I ended up showing up to the college 2 days before moving day, brother. Fortunately, I had some family in Chicago, my cousin Jesus and his wife Sarah, and they came and picked me up from the airport, and they actually got me a hotel for a couple of nights, right up until the point where I could just go to the college. And now they give me a little bit of trouble because they say, when we picked you up, you didn't really have anything with you other than your luggage. I had a backpack full of tamales, and I had $60 in my pocket to take a cab from the airport to the college, right? And so, looking back, obviously, it's funny now, but looking back, you can imagine as an 18-year-old, how stressful, right, and certainly concerning that was back then. But I figured early on that I was there to make the college dream a reality. So my cousin's wife asked me at the time, she's like, "So what are you going to do for the next 2 days? What are you going to eat?" I'm like, "Oh, don't worry, I got a backpack full of tamales, and I'm just gonna heat them up and I'll probably go to breakfast down at the hotel." And so made it happen. But fast forward to move-in day, brother. You know how it is. I mean, a lot of families come in and they bring their children, right? Their kids, and they drop them off, right? It's a very happy time. You're sending your kids right off to begin a stage of their life that is very, very important, and the whole family is a part of it. So when I arrived there, however, I was on my own. My cousin had returned to Chicago. They had to work, that week. And so, I literally, took that cab and I showed up, and I tell people it was probably one of the saddest days of my life because again, I was seeing all my peers, all my classmates being dropped off by their parents. And here I was by myself, 1,500 miles away from home, and with really nobody to share that experience with. And so, those first few weeks were tough, to say the least. But again, I figured that I wasn't necessarily there for a vacation or for a good time. I was there to obtain an education, right? Now, with time, it certainly got easier. I actually ended up joining some student organizations. I became part of a multicultural fraternity. Those guys became family away from family. And that improved my college experience, right? So by the time I graduated, I had a lot of opportunities that, again, I probably would not have had I stayed here in Arizona. So, I tell people I would do it all over again. And I'm very happy that I did. Although sometimes I kind of wonder, how did I pull that off? So, and then, we can talk about the transition into the labor force, but I figured I'll stop there and see if you have any follow-up questions or comments.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It's amazing how when you're sharing all that, I couldn't help but notice a lot of the similarities. Like I too came to this country when I was 11, a decade before you, right? So I'm feeling a little old now, but similar experience, not knowing English. I did go into a neighborhood, Washington Heights in New York, uptown Manhattan, where it was predominantly Dominican. So you could get by without knowing English within the neighborhood. You walk down to the bodega, you spoke Spanish, you were able to get your food, or the stores, everything. But outside of that, when it was time to go to school, it was a completely culture shock for me, new world. I had to leave all my friends behind and then learn the language. I'm also the youngest of 6 as well. I know you're the youngest of 4 boys, plus your sister, right? And, it was really something that impacted me at the time from, anxiety, depression. Absolutely, man, because I felt like such an outcast. Didn't have anybody that I could really relate to at the time. My siblings were several years apart. So we're just going through different stages at that point, right? And I'm glad you had the opportunity to go back and learn English and then come back with a vengeance. I'm sure that helped tremendously. And then, it's super interesting about your college experience too, because I was able to bring my family with me, but the college I went to was maybe a 45-minute drive from New York City, from where I lived, but we didn't have a car. So we had to take 2 buses and 2 trains to get there. And the trains ran on a schedule, which we had no idea. We were used to the subway, you just show up, wait for the train and hop on. It turns out this particular train, the Metro North, ran on a schedule on the weekend. It was every hour or so, so we missed the train. And by the time we got in, it was I was one of the last people. I couldn't get my ID because I already missed the time where I was supposed to go in line and get my photo taken, all kinds of stuff. No idea where to go. My parents had no clue because they don't speak English. They've never been to college here. Financial aid, yeah. When I saw the FAFSA, I'm it was another language to me, And it's just so funny, all the stuff that you actually end up just going through, but people help, right? And you just end up somehow, some way making it happen. And one thing that you mentioned really stood out to me, which I could appreciate, man, the tamales in the backpack, man. It was everything was your parents couldn't go with you, but that was that love right there, a piece of back home, take this with you, and then you were carrying that with you, man. I mean, that's just amazing, man. I love that. How was it during the college years? I know you mentioned you got involved with organizations and whatnot. Did you have a roommate throughout the years, or how did that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just really quickly to touch on some of your comments as well. I think you mentioned to me this at some point as well, is that, when you go somewhere, brother, right, whether that's coming here as an immigrant, or in my case, as I went off to college, you take a part of your culture and you take a part of your family with you, right? And I suppose you can see it, in my journey when I had that bag of tamales, right? That symbolism there with that imagery, there was no other way, right? And I think that a lot of us, like yourself and myself, we had no choice, right? We didn't have a plan in place. We didn't have, a mentor per se. I didn't, maybe you did right at the time, but, our older siblings didn't know anything, so they couldn't help us, right? Our parents didn't know anything. And I actually tell people I wasn't only the first one in my immediate family to go to college, but also the first one in my extended family to attend college. And that's a whole nother deal, right?
Yeah.
And I also make a distinction too between going to college and being able to graduate from college, right? Because as first generation immigrants, right, and first generation college students, there's a lot of us that actually make it to college, right? Whether that's community college or maybe a public school, but that doesn't mean that you finish. And for a whole host of reasons, right? A number of reasons, whether that's financial issues or maybe family issues. Maybe you feel homesick and you just want to return home. Maybe the school is tough, right? And academically, you're not able to perform. There's a number of different issues that ultimately end up preventing a first generation college student to actually graduate. And so, if we take a step back even further, very much like yourself, as we've shared our stories, I came from the barrio, right? I came from a place where, it wasn't uncommon for people to be out selling drugs on the streets, fighting, right? I mean, there were shootings nearby. As a border town, usually border towns come with a lot of violence, right? Because there's, drug smugglers, there's all kinds of crime, in borders or at the borders. And to us, that was the world that we grew up in, right? When people see the news and when people, see, what's going on at the border, they're thinking, holy cow, how can people live there, right? Well, guess what? A lot of us do come from areas like that. And I know, again, that you can probably relate to some of these things. So coming to the U.S. was obviously a big deal. But then once we were in the U.S., figuring out the differences, right, between, the new life that we had ahead of us and the life that we left behind. And so, I share that again, just to provide some context. But going back to your question, college was an amazing experience for me, brother. And I think I was very fortunate because, first of all, we actually lived at the school. Cornell, actually, I would say 90% of the students actually live on campus. You actually have to even ask for permission if you wanted to live off campus and have your own apartment or anything like that. But most students actually do choose to live on campus. So why was that important to me? Well, it was important to me because I had a community around me, right? I had my friends, my peers, my brothers from the fraternity. And to answer your question, yep, I had roommates throughout my entire college experience, the whole 4 years that I was there. I began with somebody that I didn't know, but then after that, after my freshman year, between sophomore and senior year, I was actually able to live with my fraternity brothers. Within the dorms, we didn't have a house, a Greek house or anything like that, but we were at least able to share the dorms between ourselves. So again, going back to why that was important to live on campus was because I had that support system, that community around me. So I didn't feel probably as alone as I would have felt, had I not lived on campus. We also had the cafeteria on campus. My scholarship actually included my meals and everything. And so I didn't have to necessarily worry about, maybe having to go out and get a part-time job outside of the college or anything like that. My financial aid also included work study, a work study award. So I was able to work at the school. And it's funny because I look back, I think, brother, I was making at the time about $200 a month. And out of those $200 a month that I was making from my work study, I think I would pay about $40 for our fraternity dues every month. And then we also obviously had to buy our textbook for the month. That was probably anywhere between $50 to $100. So I would say on average, every month, I maybe had $30, $40 left.
And you stretched it.
So talk about being frugal, right? And learning to be wise with your money or lack thereof in many instances. So, but again, I look back and I laugh now, but those are the kinds of things that teach you, right? To be financially responsible and to make sure that you're working towards a goal in the future. You're not necessarily looking to splurge what you don't have, right? I never fell for the credit card traps. There were actually bankers at the college during orientation week, literally, brother, handing out credit cards with like pizza cards, right?
Yes.
And I was able to stay away from those guys. I was able to stay in school when my buddies would go out, into the town, or maybe they wanted to go out to eat. Now, don't get me wrong, I wanted to go along with them, right? But I knew that I couldn't afford that, and my parents couldn't help me either. My siblings couldn't help me. They had started their own families, and so I was on my own, and that was fine because, again, I understood that I was there to obtain an education, and I had a roof, right? I had my meals and food taken care of. I had my clothes, and all I had to do was just go to class every day and deliver right on my academic studies and my academic goals. Now, the other comment I was going to make too is, going back to the student organizations, I think that was actually sort of my way out, brother, of being homesick, right? I wanted to be busy. And it's really interesting about Cornell is they actually have what we call a one-course academic calendar. So instead of taking 5-6 classes at a time, you actually would take one class at a time for 3.5 weeks.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So very focused, certainly very intense. But once you got once you understood how the system worked, and once you got used to sort of that intensity, then you had a lot of freedom, right? So we actually at Cornell had a lot of students that would end up double majoring, triple majoring. We had a lot of student athletes. And then I myself became more of a student leader. And so that's why, I was able to join the other organizations and what have you, because I only had one class to worry about. I only had to worry about one final at the end of the class, one paper, whatever that was, right, to finish off the class. And then we actually used to get 3.5 days off in between every class. So kind of, some time to recharge and come back and begin the next class. So, but I think I joined about 6 or 7 different clubs by the time I graduated. And actually, ironically, a lot of those opportunities, sort of prepared me, right, from a leadership standpoint, from a communication standpoint. They certainly elevated my skill sets there. And ironically, and I think this is important to share too. So, back in the day, you probably remember these internships weren't always paid, right? In fact, they were rarely paid, right? And so for somebody like me, I didn't have the luxury of relying again on my parents or on savings or credit cards, during the time that I wasn't at school. So what I would do, brother, is every summer when I would get off school, I would come back to Douglas, Arizona, my hometown, and I would just get a summer job. And I would basically save all of the earnings that I would get from those summer jobs to either one, help pay for my school, whatever I had left, or two, be able to spend some money throughout the school year. And so now that was not a great thing in the sense of, it didn't prepare me, to join the labor force because, as you can imagine, as I was attending a private school, a lot of my peers, by the time we actually entered our senior year, had 2-3, top internships under their belt, right? So companies were knocking on their doors to bring on those students to work for them. Well, guess what? I didn't have any at the time. I had worked at a call center. I had worked at Subway. And so I started to get concerned, to be honest with you, as I entered my senior year. And ironically, I was actually able to qualify for an internship opportunity to go abroad. I actually ended up going to South America, and the college actually made it happen because one of the top donors at the college actually had investment. They had a brokerage account down with an investment management firm in Uruguay. And so I was actually, they shipped me down there. I was down there for about 4 months. And even though I didn't get paid, the company down there paid for my apartment. And then the college actually ended up paying for my food and, the transportation, the flight there and back. So again, I was very, very lucky. And ironically, that same opportunity opened up the doors for me to even apply at Principal. So, it just kind of all went full circle. And then how the relationship with Principal actually started is because they gave me a scholarship my sophomore year of college, a minority business scholarship. So again, very, very important to mention that because, a lot of us, that's how we develop relationships, right, with these companies or potential employers, because our parents, again, have never been in the labor force, at least in that regard, right, in a sort of a white collar manner. They never received, right, a college education. So they didn't know how to help me, right? And so a lot of it was, like you said, asking my mentors, my peers, what do I do? How do I apply for an internship? I know obviously that you're doing a lot to help minority students as well in our industry, right? Be able to identify opportunities like that. But, live and learn, I suppose, right? I think a lot of what we go through makes us who we are. So
it certainly is. Yeah. And I could relate to that whole internship thing. Same for me here. Every single summer or any little time I had outside of school, I just worked, and I didn't have the luxury of attending a non-paid internship. It was just not a thing. And my parents, they were going to give me a roof over my head and food on a plate, and that's it, man. And, so anything else I needed to go get for myself. So that's why we created the BLX Internship Program. For those of you that are not aware of it, go to blxinternship.org. It's a program designed for Black and Latinx careers and career changes and students who want to enter the financial planning profession with a fee-only RIA, and it's a paid internship during the summer. So check it out, blxinternship.org. And I'll be putting it in the show notes as well. I want to transition, Diego, because you talked a lot about preparation. And I wanted to ask you, in terms of that, who was or has been the most influential person or people in your life? Because I would imagine there has to be some good mentors behind you that were able to, help you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And I'll, we'll see how this comes out too. But honestly, I didn't have a lot of mentors, brother. But I did see a lot of people that made a lot of mistakes, right? And I think that part of figuring out what it is that you want to do is also figuring out what you don't want to do,
sure.
Right?
And flip it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so being the youngest of four guys, I saw, not to pick on them, right? I saw my siblings make a lot of mistakes. I saw, our friends at the barrio make a lot of mistakes, right? I saw friends that I went to school with in Mexico that, today, honestly, they're actually not alive, right? Because of sort of as a product of the environment, right? And so, I realized early on that I didn't want to have, right, a life where I was living paycheck to paycheck, where, I couldn't provide for my family. And because I always did good at school, I figured this is going to be my way out, right? This is going to be the weapon with which, I go out and fight, the ignorance, right? The poverty that I grew up under. And that's what I leveraged, brother. Now, with that being said, I have tremendous respect for my parents and admiration for them as well. My father, was one of many in his family. It's funny. He jokes sometimes that I think it was 7 of them that slept together in the same bed. And I know you share a similar story as well. And he says that, if one of them maybe, peed the bed, then everyone peed the bed, right? Because there were 7 of them sleeping together. And on my mom's side, a very similar story as well. In fact, my mom shares this anecdote that she actually didn't even wear shoes until she was 12 years old. So my family literally came from the lowest of the low, right? And as again, my siblings and I were growing up. Granted, we certainly didn't have it as bad as they did, but there were a lot of struggles, right? There was a lot of things that we needed that we didn't have, and just in general, this sense of always needing and wanting more, right? And not in an ambitious sense, but in more of a sense to be able to secure those basic needs, right? Now, my mother actually started a grocery store business, hermano. So she actually started that grocery store business early on. It was actually, I think, it started first in our living room at our house.
Oh, wow.
And she started selling a few things. And then eventually it grew, and she was able to expand that business.
I assume there's tamales involved.
That's right. And the crazy thing is that she was always very entrepreneurial, right? So because people would actually visit the grocery store, and a lot of people would, sometimes people would come in and ask her to, maybe make food for a group of people. And she would be like, absolutely. How many of you are there? What do you guys want to eat? Sometimes she would cut ladies' hair. She would dye hair.
Wow.
You name it, brother. Whatever she could get her hands on, she would go out there and do, again, to help my father provide for us, right? And so again, that certainly instilled this desire in me to make things work, and so as you sort of asked about mentors, right? Certainly, she's up there, and my father is up there as well. Now, as I did enter college, I was able to connect with a lot of my peers, right? And then that's where I saw as well that I wasn't the only one that was struggling, right? Just like myself, there were a lot of fraternity brothers, there were a lot of peers that, were there on scholarship that, their parents couldn't help them. And again, we would relate and kind of, hold each other's hands and support each other. Now, as I graduated and started, working and I joined the labor force, I was certainly able to identify, great mentors. In fact, I consider obviously you one of them. And then, as you know, our peer, Margarita Cheng, she's been a tremendous advocate and mentor for me. Both of you actually got me to continue on the CFP journey as well, right? So, just to name a few, obviously, again, my parents, you guys, and then there's some peers at Principal as well that have been instrumental in my growth and development.
Yeah, that is so awesome, man. When you were talking about your mom and the store and everything, it reminded me of my mom as well. She used to cook for people as well. And I remember one of the things she did was she used to have her full-time job. She used to cook for people. And then another thing she used to do is like hand wash clothes for people. I remember there were like certain people, like there was the local mechanic. He didn't have a wife at the time or anything. And he just, I guess, he was busy, whatever. And he would drop off his clothes at my mom's house so she could like hand wash. So you could imagine how dirty those things were, full of auto grease and all that. And that's like one of the side hustles she had, just to help put like my sisters through school. And then eventually us being able to get the money that was required to like apply for the visas and all that and come to the US. So that's amazing. And now, speaking of entrepreneurship, I know you and your family have some businesses currently that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's funny, right? People mention that eventually you kind of become your parents, right? And I would say there's certainly some truth to that. Because again, I like yourself, I saw my mother, as an entrepreneur, and she was always, pursuing side hustles. She, used to sew for people too. I think she used to even provide like vaccinations. She was like a part-time nurse at some point. Man, all kinds of things.
Everything.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So anyway, fast forward to today. So it's interesting. So I've always, first of all, liked beef jerky, right? We're a fan of beef jerky. And my family always has been. In fact, one of the things that I like to do is go out with my dad and try different recipes and what have you. So one day I figured, it'd be nice to try to introduce the U.S. To Mexican beef jerky, because Mexican beef jerky is actually very different. It's much thinner. It's much tastier as well. It's not as chewy as U.S. Beef jerky. And honestly, it just kind of started out as a hobby. I started, reaching out to some friends and saying, hey, would you guys like to try this? Let me know what you think. Maybe at some point we're going to start selling it. And this dates back to 2019, brother. Now, all throughout last year, throughout the pandemic, because obviously we were kind of stuck at home, right? Just like everyone else was. We figured, why not try to, see if we can develop this thing and grow it and see what happens. And so we did. We once again took a leap of faith and started working with a family down in Mexico. And I think this is important to mention as well, brother, because what we're doing, it's basically an international commerce operation, right? But the partner that we identified in Mexico, and we don't actually make the beef jerky. The beef jerky is made by a family down in Mexico, right in the state of Sonora as well, up in the Sierra. And it's a family-owned business. They've been in business for about 20 years. They make it right at home. It's an original recipe that dates back generations, from my understanding.
Nice.
And so one day, through a family connection, we were able to go meet with them and literally pitch to them, to bring their Mexican jerky into the U.S. And we would basically be the U.S. distributors. And guess what? They had been kind of waiting for an opportunity like that as well. So, everything happens for a reason, I suppose. Long story short, they approved, and we partner up. And so now we actually are working on basically a white label package, because we in the U.S. are going to have our own U.S. brand. And of course, we're still going to credit the company down in Mexico and the family with the production of the beef jerky, but we're going to introduce it under our own brand. And so we're very, very excited because it's a family effort, right? We actually have my parents that are helping us down there, my siblings. My lady helps me as well here in the US. And so as we actually get the shipments of the product, we then work here to send it off to different areas. We actually ship it to places like Iowa because, obviously I still have a lot of friends and former colleagues there, California, Ohio, you name it. We're actually in about 6 different states at this point. And now, because we're working on the package and sort of the U.S. port of entry requirements, once we have all that squared away, we'll be able to get into the store. So that's kind of the next step. But we're very, very excited. So that's the first business, brother. The second business is my family and my father actually inherited some cattle from an uncle that passed away down in Mexico about 4 years ago. In fact, that's him actually up in the picture here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, our tío Tony. So, and we honestly, we come from ranchers, hermano. We come from vaqueros that literally, would go out and milk the cows in the mornings. You'd make breakfast by picking up the eggs from the, from the ranch. I mean, the whole deal, and so that's again, another aspect of my life that maybe at some point we can talk about.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, that we could do a whole nother podcast about that one right there.
That's right. So yeah, when my dad inherited some cattle from my uncle, he was a bit overwhelmed, right? Just with the standpoint of not knowing what to do with them. You can't really sell them in Mexico. I mean, you could, but the profit margin is very low, right? It's got high overhead costs if you actually want to become a cattle rancher. So long story short, he actually talked to me and he said, would you want to partner with me? Maybe not only can you invest into the business, but we can grow the herd and then, sell it. And, as our family thought about this, we figured, okay, maybe, but what if we actually consider bringing the cattle over to the US, right? So actually exporting it to the US and selling it here to hopefully get a higher profit margin. And so that's what we did. We're now, again, in the process of filing for all the paperwork to be able to get through the port of entry just fine. Ironically, literally, they literally herd. They bring the cattle right through the wall, and there's actually Border Patrol cowboys that bring the herd right through the bar. Believe it or not,
I would love to see
send you a video at some point.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's the plan, brother. And then the third business that actually credit to my lady is she actually started a meal prep business. So she's all about the healthy life, health and fitness. I myself try to be as well, just given my history with health issues. And so she basically would cook all the time and post her recipes on Instagram and social media. And people would start to ask her about the recipes. And finally, eventually some people asked her to actually cook for them, and if if she would actually make some meals for them. And so she did, and all of a sudden, she started getting more and more people asking her about her meals and what have you. And so same thing throughout the pandemic last year, I basically convinced her to just try and grow that business and develop that as a legitimate business. And she did, and she's probably up to about 10 clients now that she actually cooks for on a weekly basis. It's all healthy food, non-fried, healthy protein choices, vegetables, you name it. So that's kind of taken off. And so on the weekends, I help her prepare the food. And, now we're working to develop sort of her brand. So there's a lot going on, brother. But
that's amazing,
but all
man.
good things.
Any vegan meals yet?
Hey, absolutely coming, because as very, very important, right? In fact, part of the personal choices that we're making is to try to eat at least one vegan meal, one vegetarian meal a week. And ironically, we actually only eat red meat on the weekends. And so, everything that we're doing with the cattle business, with the beef jerky business, that also has, purpose behind that, because not only are we helping, families and employing families in Mexico, but it's being done in a very responsible way, right? I mean, our cattle is all grass fed. The beef that is used for the beef jerky is also sourced, in a very environmentally friendly way. So, we're trying to do well by doing good.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And I see a common theme here. You guys were able to take the seed of opportunity, put it with hard work and a little bit of faith in there and just make the magic happen, man. So it's just fascinating for me to see. Before we wrap up, for anybody that's interested in getting in touch with you, are you on social media at all, Instagram, anything like that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I am on Instagram. It's Diego A. Verdugo, obviously all one word. So look me up on there. I'm also obviously on LinkedIn as a professional in the financial services industry. If anybody would like to connect with me on there, by all means. I know that a lot of the audience that you have, these are students that are coming up in the industry, or maybe somebody wants to establish their own business and wants to connect and maybe pick our brains. By all means, we always welcome those opportunities as well. So again, Diego A. Verdugo on Instagram, and then on LinkedIn, just look me up, Diego Verdugo.
Yeah, and I'll be providing direct links for those on the show notes. So be sure to visit onmywaytowealth.com or whatever platform you're using to listen. Just go to the show notes. There'll be a link there for Diego's contact information. And Diego, one last question. Provided with just all the success you've had and all the struggles you've gone through personally, with the family, health issues, etc. What is one thing, like if somebody was on an elevator ride with you, they had 30 seconds, to go from the bottom floor to the 8th floor with you, and you never see them again? What are like the best piece of advice that you can think out there for just all Hispanic men and women out there that are trying to go after their dream?
Man, what a question, right? Well, first of all, the one thing I always tell people is we all have a story, right? But we just don't tell it enough. And just like we connected, right, as fellow Latinos and immigrants and, professionals in our industry, I think it's important for us to maybe not shy away from telling our story, right? Because as we tell that story, you'll be able to relate to people that look like us and, people that are coming up in the industry, right? Or are trying to establish a business or, whatever that goal might be. So sharing your story is very, very important, right? No matter where you come from, where you're at now. So don't shy away from that. I would say the second thing too is, a lot of times, we feel like we can't be what we can't see, right? However, even though I didn't see as many people that looked like me as I was going through my journey, I figured I can't be the only one, right? So if I can't see anybody else that looks like me, maybe I can be that person for somebody else that comes after, right? Now, right? Obviously, as we mature and get out and see the world, then we run into people like yourself, right? Like our friend Margarita, and we realize, what? There are people out there that are, fighting, maybe a similar fight, or there are people out there that are, struggling the way I am. The health issues part, same thing there, right? I think that life can be tough, right? And life can be mean at times, but it's better to have that versus the alternative, right? Whenever I am having health issues or whenever I struggle, with, whether that's a stomach infection or a respiratory issue, what have you, I always think, there's got to be somebody out there that is fighting a tougher battle, right? My cancer story is a very unique story as well. I got through that, with the support of my friends and family and God, my faith, right? But at the end of the day, I certainly don't feel that my fight was as tough as other people's fights with cancer, right? And so, with that being said, obviously nobody wants to ever have cancer, but it certainly gave me a lot of perspective on life, right? And I think that unfortunately, we as human beings, a lot of times wait until something bad happens to us, right? Whether there's pain or suffering involved, to make changes in our lives, right? And what I would tell people is what if you didn't have to wait for that? What if you made changes to your life today with joy, with inspiration that got you to where you wanted to be, without having to wait for that traumatic event, right? For that pain, that suffering, to maybe become more health conscious, right? Or to maybe go after that education dream, or go after that job, or start that business. So again, very, very important that whatever cards you've been dealt, you take them and you play them, and you go and you give it 150%, because again, there's always somebody that's going to have or be facing a tougher battle, and there's always going to be somebody out there that maybe wants your job, right, or wants your health. So how can you honor them, right? And how can you be grateful for what you actually do have?
That is gold right there, my brother. That is amazing. I mean, people think about it, what he said, there was a time when you prayed for what you have today, so I love that, man, like not having to wait till you're actually going through, just learning from others and realizing that sometimes you think you have it bad, somebody else has it even worse out there.
Yeah. And my mantra, brother, has always been the best is yet to come. Right. Whether that's here or maybe in the other world, we don't know that. Right. But if you keep that positive attitude, despite, whatever issues you may be dealing with or challenges, it's always going to take you, to bigger and better places. Right. And you'll be able to grow and mature and develop. So that's, I'm always going to live by that, man. If I ever, if and when I die, I want, my tomb to say the best is yet to come, because I firmly believe that.
I love it. This is awesome, man. Thank you so much, Diego. I look forward to seeing the video of the cattle crossing the border,
Yes, sir.
So once that happens, please share that with me. Everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to check out onmywaytowealth.com, also blxinternship.org for those of you that are interested, whether you're a student or career changer. And stay tuned, because we have a great lineup. I mean, Diego was kind enough to bless us with the initial episode for Hispanic Heritage Month. So just stay tuned. We have other great leaders in their own professions and stories to share as well. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.